1375, in a misty Northumbrian hamlet, where Saxon ruins shadow rain-soaked fields, you are Eadwyn, a 22-year-old yeoman's daughter, standing in a damp wattle-and-daub hovel, clutching a woolen shift with faded runes from your grandmother, silenced by the priest. Tonight is your wedding night, and Godric, a grim wheelwright with rough hands and a debt-fueled temper, waits in the candle's flicker. Your brother traded you for a cartwheel and protection. Outside, drunken villagers, farmers, weavers, alewives chant Bodhi songs, clanging pots, demanding proof of your union's blood. Your breath catches as Godric approaches, the iron cross at your neck heavy with judgment from God, devil, and village. This is no love story. It's medieval intimacy, a crucible where desire was crushed by superstition, church rules, and survival's demands. If you're drawn to history's shadows, where longing fought fear, like this story, and share where you're reading from, step into Eadwyn's world, where the marriage bed was public, church doctrine clashed with pagan whispers, and private moments were ruled by oppressive customs. This is a saga of bodies, as battlegrounds, souls split between salvation and damnation, and a woman navigating a world where love was forbidden, survival a miracle, and desire a quiet rebellion. In Eadwyn's hamlet, privacy was a myth, a luxury as unattainable as a noble's silks. The bedding ceremony was no mere custom, it was a communal sacrament, as binding as the vows sworn before the altar of the village's squat stone church, its walls blackened by centuries of candle smoke and etched with the prayers of the desperate. As Eadwyn and Godric were herded to their straw-filled mattress, the villagers crowded around, their faces flushed with ale and mischief. The miller's wife, her hands rough from grinding grain, tugged at Eadwyn's kirtle, while the shepherd's lads bellowed crude jests about plowing fields and breaking mares, their laughter sharp as a blade. Eadwyn's aunt, her only surviving kin, pressed a linen shift into her hands, its edges stitched with protective charms, knots, and runes from a time before priests held sway, meant to ward off the evil eye, barrenness, and the wrath of spirits that lingered in the moors. The crowd lingered outside the flimsy walls, their ears pressed to the cracks in the daub, listening for the cries that would prove the marriage's legality. A bloodied sheet, proof of Eadwyn's virginity, would be hoisted at dawn, paraded through the muddy lanes like a merchant's banner to secure her family's honor and Godric's claim to her body. Failure to produce it could mean disgrace, annulment, or worse, a whispered tale told of a bride flogged and cast out when no blood appeared, her family shamed into poverty, her name erased from the village's memory. The church loomed over every moment, its shadow cast by centuries of doctrine etched in Latin tomes and preached from pulpits. Theologians like St. Jerome had declared that a man who loved his wife too ardently was an adulterer. Even in marriage, for pleasure was a corruption of the soul. Thomas Aquinas laid out explicit rules. Sexual intercourse was permissible only for procreation, and only in the natural position, man above, woman below, face to face, to avoid the sin of unnatural pleasure. Any deviation, rear entry, woman on top, or, God forbid, oral acts was a mortal sin, damning the soul to eternal fire. The church's calendar was a labyrinth of prohibitions. No sex during Lent, Advent, or major feast days like Christmas or Easter. No sex on Sundays, Wednesdays, or Fridays, which were days of penance. No sex during menstruation, pregnancy, or breastfeeding, lest it defile the sacred act of procreation. Scholars estimate this left couples with fewer than 60 days a year for lawful intimacy, a narrow window that turned every touch into a calculation of risk. For Eadwyn, every moment with Godric was a tightrope walk between duty and damnation. To refuse him risked a beating, sanctioned by laws of coverture that made her his property, her body no longer her own. To yield on a forbidden day, like a Tuesday in Advent, meant risking her soul, a sin that could condemn her to hell's flames. Her aunt's whispered advice, given in the churchyard before the ceremony, was stark. Pray to Saint Margaret, child, and bear it for the family. Clench your teeth and think of heaven. The candle's flicker offered no comfort as Godric's shadow loomed closer, his breath heavy with the sour tank of ale. Medieval medicine, rooted in the works of Galen, Hippocrates, and Aristotle, saw women as defective men, their bodies mere inversions of male perfection. The vagina was an inside-out penis, the ovaries internal testicles. According to texts studied in universities from Salerno to Oxford, copied by monks in candlelit scriptoria, these ideas shaped how Eadwyn's world understood her body, casting it as both a mystery and a danger, a vessel of sin and potential salvation. Physicians like Constantine the African taught that women required prolonged stimulation and multiple climaxes to conceive, a belief that twisted into a cruel legal principle. If a woman became pregnant after rape, it was proof she had enjoyed it, absolving the attacker of guilt. Eadwyn had heard of women dragged before church courts, their bodies probed by midwives under the priest's watchful eye, accused of consenting to assaults that left them pregnant and shamed. One such woman, a dairymaid from a neighboring village, had been exiled after a nobleman's assault resulted in a child, her pregnancy taken as evidence of her complicity. The injustice burned in Eadwyn's chest, a silent rage she dared not voice, for to speak was to invite suspicion. The wandering womb was a pervasive terror, woven into the fabric of every woman's life. Medieval doctors believed the uterus could drift within the body, causing hysteria, suffocation, or madness. Its movements blamed for everything from fainting spells to violent outbursts. Treatments were as bizarre as they were brutal. Sweet-smelling herbs like lavender, rose, or myrrh were burned near the vagina to lure the womb back to its proper place, while noxious concoctions, rotting fish, dung, or sulfur were smeared under the nose to drive it downward. Eadwyn's grandmother, a healer branded a witch by the village priest, had taught her to brew fennel and chamomile teas to ease menstrual cramps, to chew yarrow leaves for heavy bleeding, and to sleep with a sprig of vervain under her pillow to calm the wom's restless wanderings. But such knowledge was a dangerous secret, shared only in whispers among women, hidden from the prying eyes of priests and physicians. The church saw herbalists as agents of Satan, and a single accusation could lead to the stake. Eadwyn had seen it happen. A neighbor, accused of poisoning a barren wife with her teas, was burned alive in the village square, her screams echoing through the hamlet as Eadwyn's aunt held her back from the jeering crowd, whispering, "Say nothing, or we're next." Menstruation was a source of dread, its blood believed to poison crops, dull blades, and sap men's vitality. The Roman naturalist Pliny the Elder, whose works were still studied in medieval universities, claimed menstrual blood could drive dogs mad, sour wine, or kill bees, and these beliefs lingered, shaping Eadwyn's world. She was barred from church during her cycle, forbidden to touch sacred objects, prepare food, or even cross the threshold of the village's communal oven. Women were sent to menstrual huts, ramshackle shelters on the hamlet's edge, where they lived in isolation until their bleeding stopped, their presence deemed a pollutant to the community's purity. Eadwyn used moss, rags, or scraps of sheepskin as makeshift protection, tracking her cycle by the phases of the moon, a practice taught by her grandmother in defiance of the church's condemnation. Women shared secret remedies: nettle tea for pain, sage for irregular flows, but these were hidden from priests and physicians, who saw such knowledge as witchcraft. The church taught that menstruation was Eve's curse, a monthly reminder of feminine shame, and Eadwyn felt its weight in every sidelong glance from the village wives, their whispers branding her as unclean. Fertility was a battleground where Christian doctrine clashed with older/earthier beliefs, a tension that pulsed through every aspect of village life. Tansy and pennyroyal, brewing teas that could prevent pregnancy or kill if the dose was misjudged. Mandrake roots, shaped like tiny humans, were prized as fertility charms, worn against the skin or buried under hearths to ensure conception. Their value was so great that peddlers risked flogging to sell forged mandrakes carved from cheaper bryony in the bustling markets of nearby towns. Eadwyn's aunt had buried a piece of her own afterbirth beneath the hearth, a ritual to secure future children performed in secret to avoid the priest's wrath. Such acts were a delicate dance between faith and folklore, blending prayers to Saint Margaret, patron of childbirth, with charms from a time before Christ, when the earth itself was worshipped as a mother. Contraception was a deadly art, a desperate gamble in a world without mercy. Potions laced with mercury, lead, or arsenic promised to end unwanted pregnancies, but often ended lives instead. Eadwyn knew of a girl, Elfric's sister, who drank such a brew and was found lifeless by the millstream, her body bloated with poison, her death a hushed warning to others. Infanticide, though condemned by the church, was a grim reality for women facing social ruin. Unmarried mothers were cast out, their families shamed, their lives forfeit to the cold moors or the hangman's noose. Childbirth itself was a roll of the dice. Maternal mortality claimed 1 in 3 women, their graves marked with simple stones or none at all. A boy who followed her to the grave before his first moon. Eadwyn's fear of Godric's touch was as much about the specter of a bloody childbed as it was about divine judgment, the shadow of death looming over every embrace. Pagan rituals endured despite the church's relentless crusade to erase them. May Day, cloaked in Christian guise as a feast for Saint Walburga, was a night of sexual freedom, its bonfires and garlands a thin veil for older rites. Young people slipped into the woods, ostensibly to gather hawthorn or primrose, but in truth to steal kisses or more under the stars, their trysts leading to a surge in winter births. Eadwyn had once joined such a revel, her heart racing as she danced with a tanner's apprentice, their hands brushing in the dark, his breath warm against the chill of the spring air. Wedding beds were sprinkled with holy water by the priest, but village women secretly laced them with herbs like vervain, rosemary, or mugwort, believed to ensure fertility or protect against miscarriage. Eadwyn's aunt had sewn a sprig of mugwort into her shift, a quiet act of defiance against the church's sterile rules, whispering, "This will keep the babe strong," and the priest none the wiser. The village wise women, often branded witches by later generations, maintained an underground knowledge of herbs and rituals: pennyroyal for contraception, mandrake for fertility, willow bark for labor pains. and chamomile for calming the nerves of a laboring mother. These secrets were passed down through generations, shared in hushed tones by the hearth or in the shadow of the forest, hidden from the priest's prying eyes. Eadwyn had learned to crush yarrow leaves for a poultice to ease childbirth, a skill taught by her grandmother, who warned her to guard it with her life. The Church's condemnation of such practices as witchcraft made every remedy a risk, every shared secret a potential death sentence. The night was alive with unseen terrors, a realm where the veil between the mortal and the demonic grew thin. Eadwyn grew up on tales of succubi and incubi, demons who seduced sleeping men and women, stealing their vitality through forbidden acts. Theologians like St. Augustine taught that these creatures could collect a man's seed as a succubus, then transform into an incubus to impregnate a woman, birthing cursed or demonic offspring. Sleep paralysis, with its crushing weight and paralyzing fear, was proof of demonic assault, a phenomenon Eadwyn had experienced once, waking, unable to move, a heavy presence pressing on her chest as shadows danced in the corners of her vision. Women who spoke of such nightmares risked accusations of witchcraft, their confessions wrung out under torture in the Church's dank cells. Eadwyn's grandmother had taught her to keep a hazel twig and a sprig of St. John's wort under her pillow to ward off these spirits. But even this could be deemed sorcery if discovered. A neighbor's daughter, accused of consorting with an incubus after a sleep-paralyzed scream, had been scourged and exiled, her fate a warning to all. Her family, shamed, fled the hamlet under cover of night, their cottage left to rot. The Church's obsession with sexual sin extended to the body's natural functions, turning even the most mundane into a battleground of morality. Menstruation was a curse, its blood a poison in the eyes of God and man. Eadwyn was taught that her monthly flow was Eve's punishment, a reminder of feminine shame rooted in the Garden of Eden. She was barred from church, forbidden to touch sacred objects, prepare food, or even cross the threshold of the village's communal oven during her cycle. Women were sent to menstrual huts, ramshackle shelters on the hamlet's edge, where they lived in isolation, their presence deemed a pollutant to the community's purity. Eadwyn used moss, rags, or scraps of sheepskin as makeshift protection, tracking her cycle by the phases of the moon, a practice taught by her grandmother in defiance of the Church's condemnation. Women shared secret remedies: nettle tea for pain, sage for irregular flows, yarrow for heavy bleeding, but these were hidden from priests and physicians who saw such knowledge as witchcraft. The fear of menstrual blood was rooted in ancient texts. Pliny the Elder claimed it could kill crops, dull knives, or drive dogs mad, and these beliefs shaped Eadwyn's world, making her a danger to her own community each month, her body a living sin in the eyes of the village. Eadwyn's virginity was her family's most valuable asset, more precious than the yeoman's land they'd lost to the manor's greed or the goats bleating in the yard. The hymen, misunderstood as a solid barrier rather than the flexible tissue it is, was proof of her purity, a commodity traded to secure Godric's alliance. Failure to produce blood on the wedding sheet could mean disgrace, annulment, or death. Eadwyn had heard of brides who hid vials of pigeon blood or pricked their fingers to fake the evidence, their deception a desperate bid for survival. Some used chicken blood, smuggled in secret, to stain the sheets, knowing the crowd outside would inspect them at dawn. Church courts treated consummation as a legal matter, interrogating couples about their wedding night with clinical precision. inspecting women's bodies for signs of penetration, and summoning neighbors to testify about sounds heard through walls. These inquiries turned private moments into public trials, with scribes recording every detail in Latin ledgers. Eadwyn dreaded the possibility that Gotrek might claim her barren or tainted if no heir followed, a charge that could unravel her family's fragile standing and leave her cast out, branded a harlot or worse. Courtly love, sung by troubadours like Bernard de Ventadorn or de Trosse, was a noble fantasy, a world of knights pining for unattainable ladies in a spiritual dance of longing purified by suffering. But for peasants like Eadwyn, marriage was a contract, her body a bargaining chip in a transaction as cold as the coins that changed hands. She had once dreamed of the weaver's son, whose gentle laugh warmed her at the harvest fair, his eyes kind in a way Godric's would never be. But her brother's need for a wheelwright's wealth outweighed her heart's quiet hopes. The betrothal feast had been a grim affair, held in the village's lone alehouse, with Godric's drunken kin shouting crude jests as Eadwyn stared at the dirt floor, her dreams of a kinder life buried beneath the weight of duty. Some villages practiced bundling, where engaged couples slept together, clothed, separated by a wooden board to test compatibility without risking pregnancy. But Eadwyn's marriage allowed no such trial. Her fate was sealed with a handshake and a priest's muttered blessing, her body signed over like a deed. Despite the church's iron grip, desire found ways to slip through the cracks, a quiet rebellion against the weight of doctrine and fear. The fabliau's body tales, told by traveling minstrels in the flickering light of market squares, spoke of secret trysts and cunning lovers outwitting jealous husbands. Eadwyn overheard such stories at the village market, their crude humor a fleeting escape from joyless dogma, a reminder that human desire could not be fully tamed. May Day revels, disguised as Christian feasts for Saint Walburga, saw young couples vanish into the forest, their encounters leading to a spike in winter births. Eadwyn had once slipped away during such a night, her pulse quickening as she shared a stolen kiss with a tanner's apprentice, his hands warm against the chill of the spring air, his breath a fleeting promise of something softer than Godric's rough grasp. The church condemned these heathen rites, but they persisted, woven into the fabric of village life, a shadow world where desire could breathe, if only for a night. Brothels, though condemned by the church, operated under civic oversight in nearby towns, their workers marked by red cloaks or yellow hoods to signify their trade. These women, often widows or outcasts, were subjected to weekly inspections by civic officials, their bodies treated as public property. Eadwyn's cousin, a maid at the manor, whispered of noblemen who frequented such places, their sins overlooked, while peasant women faced the stake for lesser offenses. The rite of first night or just prime noctis, whether myth or truth, hung like a specter, a reminder of the Lord's power over peasant brides. Eadwyn's cousin told tales of noblemen who demanded such privileges, their actions cloaked in feudal custom, their victims silenced by fear of retribution. Chastity belts, more legend than common practice, symbolized the era's paranoia about female autonomy. Eadwyn's aunt told tales of noblewomen locked in iron contraptions during their husbands' absences, their bodies caged to preserve honor. Such stories, true or not, fed the village's fear of unchecked desire, a fear that kept women like Eadwyn under constant scrutiny. Yet rebellion persisted in quieter ways. Women shared herbal lore, in secret, passing down recipes for teas that could ease a pregnancy or end it. Their knowledge a hidden power against the church's control. Eadwyn had learned to brew pennyroyal tea from her grandmother, a dangerous skill she guarded with her life, knowing a single slip could brand her a witch. Marriage for Eadwyn was about survival, not love. In a world where half of all children died before age 10, and every pregnancy was a gamble with death, the church preached that pleasure was a sin, but procreation was a divine mandate, a duty etched in blood and bone. Physicians, blending Aristotle with folklore, taught that conception required both partners' seed released through climax, a belief that mocked women like Eadwyn, whose fear left no room for joy. Astrologers advised coupling under specific stars to ensure a son, and Eadwyn's aunt had paid a traveling seer to chart the heavens for a male heir, believing a waxing moon and a rising Mars would favor a boy. The village wise women, in defiance of the church, taught that certain positions or times of the month could influence a child's sex. Their knowledge, a blend of observation and superstition, passed down through generations. The Inquisition, gaining power in the 13th century, turned intimacy into a battlefield. Priests probed penitents in confession, demanding details of positions, frequency, and sensations. Their questions, recorded in penitential manuals that cataloged sins in obsessive detail and natural positions, nocturnal emissions, even stray thoughts, each with its own punishment. Fasting for days, flogging with a birch rod, or pilgrimage to distant shrines like Canterbury or Compostela. Eadwyn's confessions were careful half-truths, her fear of hell warring with her dread of Godric's temper, his fists a more immediate threat than divine wrath. The church's network of informants, village gossips, zealous priests, even children bribed with bread ensured no secret went unnoticed, turning neighbors into spies and bedrooms into courtrooms. The medieval world was a web of surveillance and punishment designed to chain desire to the will of God and man. Village gossips reported on neighbors, their whispers carrying the weight of law. Priests used confession to extract intimate secrets, their questions probing the most private corners of the soul. The Inquisition's manuals, like the Malleus Maleficarum, included detailed questions about sexual habits, turning private acts into evidence of heresy. Women convicted of adultery faced cages so small they couldn't stand, fed only bread and water until death claimed them. Men guilty of rape might be castrated publicly, their punishment a spectacle to enforce compliance. Eadwyn had seen a man hanged for sodomy, his body left swinging in the village square as a warning, the crows circling as the village children threw stones. Sexual compatibility was another obsession, rooted in both medicine and theology. Physicians examined brides for signs of fertility. Wide hips were a good omen, narrow ones a curse, their inspections as clinical as those for livestock. Grooms were tested for potency, their bodies scrutinized for signs of weakness or deformity. The church added spiritual tests, warning that couples too closely related by blood or spiritual kinship through baptism risked cursed offspring or sexual dysfunction. Annulments often hinged on these rules, leaving women like Eadwyn vulnerable to accusations of barrenness or impurity. The village's elders, acting as unofficial judges, would question couples about their intimate lives, their inquiries as invasive as the church's own, their judgments final in the court of village opinion. Courtship in Eadwyn's world was a pragmatic affair, governed by economic necessity rather than passion. while troubadours sang of courtly love nights, pining for unattainable ladies in a spiritual dance of longing. Purified by suffering peasants like Eadwyn faced a harsher reality. Betrothals were contracts, negotiated like livestock deals over mugs of ale in the village tavern. Eadwyn's brother had haggled with Godric's kin, weighing her virginity against the promise of a steady income from the wheelwright's trade. Some villages practiced bundling, where engaged couples slept together, clothed, separated by a wooden board called a bundling board, to test compatibility without risking pregnancy. But Eadwyn's marriage allowed no such trial. Her fate was sealed with a handshake and a priest's muttered blessing. Her body signed over like a deed to land. Fertility rituals, steeped in pagan roots, persisted despite Christian bans. The May Day festival, with its garlands, bonfires, and dances, was a thin veil for older rites. A night when the rules of church and village loosened. Young couples slipped into the woods, their trysts leading to pregnancies that filled the village with February babes. Eadwyn's wedding included its own rituals. The bed was blessed with holy water by the priest, but her aunt had secretly tucked a sprig of vervain beneath the mattress, believed to ensure a son. The village women showered Eadwyn with barley grains and dried peas, a fertility charm disguised as a Christian blessing, their hands quick to hide the act from the priest's gaze. Other rituals were more overt. Brides were sometimes made to leap over a broom or drink a potion of honey and wine to ensure conception. Their bodies the center of a communal hope for new life in a world where death was ever present. Sexual reputation was a fragile thing, especially for women, whose honor was tied to their chastity in ways men's never were. A single rumor could destroy a woman's prospects, branding her a harlot, or worse. Eadwyn had seen it happen. Dairymaid, caught speaking too long with a peddler behind the barn, was shunned. Her family forced to pay a fine to restore their honor, their livelihood crippled by the loss. Men faced less scrutiny. A man's sexual prowess was tied to his status as a warrior or provider, and impotence was a public humiliation that could ruin his standing. The village had its own vocabulary of shame, with euphemisms for sexual dysfunction whispered in the alehouse. A soft plow or a broken spindle, their sting as sharp as any blade. Adultery, though a sin for both, was punished far more harshly for women. A wife caught with another man could be killed by her husband with no legal consequence, the law granting him the right to correct her as he saw fit. Men, however, faced fines or penance for their dalliances, their sins forgiven with a few coins or a week of fasting. Rape was a crime not against the woman but against the man who owned her, her father, husband, or lord. Punishment varied by status. A nobleman who raped a peasant might pay a small fine, his honor barely tarnished, while a peasant who raped a noblewoman faced torture and death, his body quartered as a warning. Eadwyn had heard of a serving girl at the manor assaulted by a knight, whose complaint was dismissed as temptation on her part, her family forced to leave the hamlet in shame. The injustice burned in Eadwyn's chest, a quiet rage she buried beneath layers of fear and duty, knowing that to speak was to risk her own life. As Godric's calloused hands undo the cord at Eadwyn's throat, the candlelight casts jagged shadows across the dirt floor, the rushes crunching under his weight. She is not just a bride, but a vessel for her family's honor, her village's expectations, and her church's unyielding doctrines. Every touch is a negotiation between survival and sin, desire and dread. Her body a battleground where the forces of faith, fear, and longing collide. The medieval world saw sexuality as a force to be chained, its power feared as much as death itself, yet human longing endured. In whispered secrets, stolen glances, and the quiet rebellion of a May Day kiss. The bizarre practices of Eadwyn's world-bending ceremonies, toxic potions, demonic terrors, invasive rituals, and the relentless surveillance of body and soul were not mere quirks, but the product of a society wrestling with the eternal tension between desire and control. Her story is a mirror to our own, reflecting how power, fear, and faith shaped the most intimate corners of human life. The medieval bedroom was a crucible, forging bonds of duty, survival, and defiance in the face of overwhelming odds. Eadwyn's trembling hands, clutching her iron cross, carry the weight of centuries of superstition and control, its edges biting into her palm as a reminder of the cost of defiance. Yet, in her quiet acts of resistance, sharing herbal lore with her sisters, dreaming of a kinder touch, whispering defiance in the dark, she embodies the unbreakable spirit of human desire, a flame that no doctrine could extinguish. This world of forbidden flames reveals the resilience of the human heart, finding ways to love and yearn despite a system designed to crush it. The medieval hamlet, with its muddy lanes, watchful eyes, and relentless rules, was a prison of sorts, but also a stage for rebellion, where women like Eadwyn carved out moments of agency in the shadows. Their stories remind us that sexuality, in every era, is a battleground where fear and longing collide, where the human spirit fights to be heard above the clamor of rules and rituals, and where the quest for connection remains an eternal, unquenchable fire burning through the ages to light even the darkest corners of history.